Raina Troy Hotline.
Alicia, Michael, what's going on?
We know you have takes. We have takes.
I'm actually surprised that your Rant Line, Rave Line, whatever, isn't completely full.
Why can't we just win a game?
Can I blame Michael Castillo for this?
Can I blame Bob Connolly for this?
Could I put on a zebra shirt and just go out there?
Scratch, claw, up against the wall. Can't explain it what I'm feeling right now, guys. I can't believe it. Let's open up that race line.
Woohoo!
Oh, I can't believe USC has hired Lincoln Riley. Oh, yeah.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Rant Line Radio. This is episode 517 coming to you on Wednesday, November 1st. We're going to preview USC and Washington, the Trojans, the Huskies, locking horns at the Coliseum, 4:30 p.m. on ABC on Saturday night. It's going to be a big one. As always, you can follow us on Twitter at Rant of Troy, like us on Facebook, facebook.com/Rant of Troy. Be sure to subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, including live here on YouTube, and of course, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, wherever. As always, subscribe there and give us a review. That always helps. Email address, rantoftroy@fanside.com. Phone number, 818-643-7227. Second Whisper and Show. I'm your host, Michael Castillo, joined along with my co-host, who doesn't remember our bits, Elisa Dertola.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. What's with the lack of energy?
I was too busy reading the chat about how Richard has been listening to us on 2x speed, and so now we sound really slow, and I was sort of giggling.
We're going to have to speed up. We're going to have to speed up when we talk. Can you do this? I can't do it.
Yeah. So the problem is that you start the show and you start doing your thing, and then my mind wanders to the chat or getting my notes ready or all of that kind of stuff. And then by the time I recognize that you're already at the phone number, I've missed it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Sure. Yeah. You missed that, but the Rotbots don't want to miss this opportunity from DraftKings. They're running a new promotion right now that you won't want to miss. $5 for your first bet, and you instantly claim $200 in bonus bets. You'll also be rewarded with a separate no sweat single game parlay every single day when you opt in. All you have to do is use the code Rant of Troy when signing up, and using that code Rant of Troy not only helps you get those bonus perks, helps support the podcast. This one right here. Of course, this offer is only available to new customers who are 21 plus and physically present in legal gambling states. Please remember to always gamble responsibly and check the episode description for the full terms of the offer to see if you qualify. Rant of Troy is the code over at DraftKings. Alicia, this is a gigantic week because it's SC in Washington. The Trojans hosting number 5 Washington. We'll talk about where USC is in the rankings coming up in the news. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, we got to start with some injury updates first before we get to the rankings. Zion Branch out for the remainder of the season. We know that he got hurt up in Berkeley last week at Cal. He was spotted on crutches during the second half of the Cal game, and he will be out for the rest of the season. That's bad news for SC because I thought he played well against Utah. We saw moments of him when he's gotten out there that have looked promising at safety. Now it looks like it's going to be status quo for the Trojans when he sort of could have brought some life to the defense.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate because, like you said, he could have been the kind of guy, the kind of freshman that, redshirt freshman as he is, that by the end of the season has taken over a starting job, is sort of setting a new tone at the safety position, allows USC to have competition at that position if the veterans that are there aren't getting the job done. He was starting to slowly come into his own. He was starting to slowly get a little bit more trust and a little bit more playing time, and then that happens, and now USC's in a really tough spot because you don't have a lot of available other options. I suppose now you got to start crossing your fingers and hoping that maybe Christian Pierce is ready to start playing a little bit as a true freshman. That I think the intention is to redshirt him, but he was getting a lot of good reviews in camp, so that's maybe the new bright hope for USC if that's something that happens. I'm just not he hasn't been getting playing time, so I'm assuming that that's sort of not that hasn't been or won't be part of the plan. It's just unfortunate, especially because Max Williams has been dealing with an injury for a while now, and Bryson Shaw is just somewhat limited in that role. So next to Kalen Bullock, you're short on options. You're way more short on options than you'd like with a defense that's struggling as much as USC's defense is.
Yeah, the good news for SC is Max Williams and Jacoby Covington were at practice on Wednesday, or Tuesday, sorry, at practice on Tuesday and in pads for whatever that means. Media does not get to see practice, does not get to see if they were participating in full team drills or anything like that. So who knows what that means, but they were there. Maybe that could bode well to have an extra body there at safety or in the DB area, just being able to mix and match, whether it be at nickel or true safety.
One that's interesting is Jacoby Covington I believe he played safety at Washington somewhat early in his career. So maybe that's another thing that you can mess around with. You can try out to sort of fill in guys like Jacoby Covington, like Christian Roland Wallace was being talked about as somebody that was being moved around.
You could play both, yeah,
into different positions, depending on how they feel about Jalen Smith. You could if you're not comfortable with Jacoby Covington playing safety, you could bring Jacoby Covington back at corner and then have Christian Roland Wallace fill in at nickel if you're willing to move Jalen Smith or move Christian Roland Wallace or move Jacoby Covington. You have to you might have to work with your corners in a little bit of this way. The plus side, I suppose, is that the thing that we've been able to say about USC's defensive backs across the board is that there's a lot of versatility in terms of the kinds of roles that these guys can play.
Yeah.
So maybe that is a potential solution. But I also, like, having said all of that, just to make it very clear, I don't expect USC to be creative. I don't expect USC to do anything on a sort of genius schematic level to fill this hole. I fully expect them to say, well, we're riding with Kalen Bullock and Bryson Shaw until the cows come home and hope that Max Williams is healthy and just roll with 3, which is sort of what they've been doing the whole time, but starting to work in Zion Branch because Max Williams wasn't available. So I'm expecting more of the same, but I would welcome some creativity here, some shuffling around, kind of like what they did on the offensive line, because I mean, after that Cal game, we all know that the defense is just, I can't step away from the word catastrophic. And when we saw a catastrophic offensive line performance, they shuffled the offensive line. Right. So maybe there's an argument here to be shuffling the secondary a little bit, but my faith on that is low.
Yeah, I think there is grounds for it. You just have to, be willing to do that. Is SC going to be willing to do that? I don't know. And I think that when the defense is played the way that they are, I think you should be willing to try everything. You shouldn't just be super rigid. It's one of those things you might as well try something, right?
I think Jalen Smith has done he's been quietly one of USC's better defensive players. He's had a couple like lowlights in terms of getting beat one-on-one, but a dude getting beat one-on-one is the least of USC's defensive problems at this point. I think Jalen Smith has been out there making plays, and Christian Roland Wallace has been out there making plays. So I don't know, maybe try to put those guys on the field together more often.
Yeah, Jalen Smith made the play on the 2-point conversion to win the game for the Trojans the other day. So, yeah, we'll see what happens for the Trojans in the secondary. Not like they have to face anybody world beatery.
Hmm.
Hold on, what's this? Oh, Michael Penix comes to the Coliseum today, this week. So there's that. Let's get to the other news, which is the rankings. The Trojans have debuted in the 2023 college football playoff rankings at number 20. 20. They're 24 in the AP poll, but 20 in the college football playoff rankings. What's your thought there? I think the rankings in general are sort of much different than the AP top 25. We talked about this before, that the rankings are just different in the college football playoff because they can sort of start anew. They don't have to like look at last week's or at least they don't end up looking at last week's version and going from there. They can sort of start fresh, and the result is Ohio State, who's number 3 in the AP poll, is number 1 in playoff rankings. Georgia's number 1 in the AP poll, they're number 2, and Michigan, who is number 2, is number 3. So there's a lot of changes up there, but you look at towards the bottom of the rankings. SC is now 20th in the playoff rankings when they're 24th in the AP. But right ahead of them at 19 is UCLA, who SC will conclude the season against 2 weeks from now. Next week is number 6 Oregon, and this week number 5 Washington. Easily the most difficult schedule remaining in college football.
Yeah, I mean, to talk about the difference between the rankings in the college football playoff and the AP. The AP is a bunch of voters who are scattered around the country who are, quite frankly, voting on different metrics. There is not a consistent there's not consistent guidance on how to fill out your AP top 25 ballot. You just do it.
Mhm.
And I think the big difference that we see with the college football playoff is that this is people who are together in a room talking through and going through a very rigid process for determining where each team ranks. And it creates a ranking that is probably just a reflection of everybody is using the same rubric. And that's going to help you sort of get to where these rankings are. Relative to that rubric, it makes sense that USC is 20th because they're going to be paying attention to a lot of advanced metrics. They're going to be paying attention to a lot of different sort of matchup questions, schedule questions, all of that. Instead of being this was your preseason ranking and we're going to adjust you accordingly, they're starting from 0. And when you look at USC, I know it's disappointing where USC is at from a USC fan perspective, but the advanced metrics bear out that USC is a top 20 team in college football at this exact moment. SP Plus has USC at 17th. FEI has SP Plus is 14th. FEI is 17th. FPI is 17th, and Sagarin is 18th. So like the formulas and all that kind of stuff support USC being top 20. I don't mind where USC is at in terms of being behind. You got to be behind Utah. Utah beat you fair and square. Being behind UCLA, marginally whatever. UCLA has significantly better defense than USC. They're both one-dimensional teams. It's sort of hard to separate them at this point. But the fact of the matter is that USC is where they are because their record puts them there at 7-2, and you will either beat Washington and stay in there or lose to Washington and fall out of there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it comes down to. If SC wins their 3 remaining games, they're going to be a top 10 team. If they don't, then they won't. This is such a weird fork in the road position for SC to be in because looking at the form in which SC has played, it's easily one of those positions where you say, well, they're underdogs the next 2 weeks. It's flip a coin against UCLA in 2 weeks. They're 7-5 is on the table, but also at the end, the opposite is also true of, this team could end up putting everything together. Would I bet on that? Not in a billion years, but it's there. So it's there. We'll see what happens starting Saturday. So let's get into it. USC and Washington. The Trojans and the Huskies. The Trojans hosting Kalen DeBoer and the Huskies, Michael Penix, Rome Odunze. This is a absolutely loaded team for the Washington Huskies. Number 5 in the country, number 5 in the college football playoff rankings. Kalen DeBoer, year 2, 19-2 as the head coach of the Huskies, of course, hired by Jen Cohen, USC's current athletic director, formerly Washington's athletic director. Kalen DeBoer, a guy that we put high on our tier list 2 years ago, in part because he has had one of the weirdest coaching trajectories I've ever seen. Dude won national titles at the NAIA level, and I understand that the NAIA level is, different than NCAA. I get it. But he was dominant at that level as a head coach, and then had to go to all these small schools and sort of build himself up forever until he got to the point where he was at Fresno State as the offensive coordinator, and then he went to Indiana as the offensive coordinator, and then Fresno State as the head coach, and ultimately Washington as the head coach. And now he's 19-2 through 2 years. So they are rolling. They're absolutely rolling. 8-0 in the season, 5-0 in the conference. 7th in SP Plus, 12th in FEI, 15th in Sagarin, which is interesting because they have arguably the best win of the season of anybody. They beat Oregon at home in an absolute beautiful football game, 36-33. Beat Oregon at the death when the odds were against them. Penix leads them down on a brilliant touchdown drive, and then the Ducks couldn't answer with a field goal to send it to OT. But some of the numbers don't necessarily look great for them when you look at Sagarin at 15th. Washington, October has been a weird month for them. Last week against ASU, a bizarre game in which they won 15-7. They nearly lost on the farm last week against Stanford. This is a team that easily is playing for a playoff bid and a national title contender, no doubt about it. But they've had a weird month of October with the Oregon win thrown in there. Of course, they're led by quarterback Michael Penix, completing 69% of his passes, 2,945 yards, 24 TDs, 6 picks. Quarterback rating of a $176.1. Number 1 in the country in passing yards per game at 368. And not only number 1 in the country in passing yards per game, he's number 1 in the country at passing by a wide margin, by 30 yards. Sorry, 40 yards, 39 yards. That's how many more yards he throws per game than anybody else in the country, which is wild. The Indiana transfer has been huge up in Montlake for the Huskies. It's a one-dimensional offense. They're not going to run the football much. The running game led by Dylan Johnson only has 430 yards on the season with 6 touchdowns, averaging 4.94 yards a pop. He's a Mississippi State transfer. He's the guy to keep an eye on in the running game, but they're not going to run the football that much. This is a passing offense led by a wide receiver core that's probably the best in the country. I up there at least. Rome Odunze of 51 catches, 907 yards, 7 touchdowns. Jalen Polk, 46 catches, 836 yards, and 7 TDs. Jalen McMillan, 20 catches, 311 yards, 3 TDs. That triumvirate is absolutely lethal. It's Washington and Ohio State. It's probably the best receiving cores in the country, and Washington's got the quarterback to throw to those guys. At wide receiver also, there's Jeremy Bernard, 20 catches, 274 yards, and a touchdown. Tight end, look for Jack Westover, 20 catches, also 185 yards, 4 TDs. So he's someone who can sort of wreak havoc in the red zone. But you look at the numbers, Alicia, this is a horrible matchup for USC's defense. The Trojans are 113th in scoring defense, and they're now going up against an offense that averages 40.4 points per game. This is the number 1 passing offense against the 106th passing defense. What do you make of it? Because it doesn't look good when you look at Washington's strength against USC's weakness.
Yeah, the graphic we have up on the screen right now displays it pretty thoroughly. There's a lot of top 10 ranks for Washington on offense and a lot of bottom 25 ranks for USC's defense. It's not a good matchup at all. It's a terrifying matchup. In fact, one of the biggest concerns that I have is that USC's defense statistically looks pretty identical to what it was last year. But last year we had the added statistical element of USC having played UCLA and Notre Dame and Utah again and Tulane, all very, very good offenses that USC played in the stretch of games looking forward from the first 9. At this point in 2022, USC's defense was averaging 25.2 points per game allowed, which is not great, but it wasn't terrible. It wasn't bad. Right now, USC's defense is allowing 32.6 points per game through 9 games. So, 7 points worse off than where they were at this point last year with the best offenses that USC is going to face going forward. And certainly Washington's offense is up there. Michael Penix is the best quarterback, arguably, that USC will face this year, unless you want to argue that it's Bo Nix. But either way, it's one of those two guys that's going to be the best quarterback USC has faced. This is going to be, I think, far and away the best receiving core that USC has faced, even having played Arizona, who has a very, very strong receiving core and whose receiving core ripped USC to shreds, by the way, with a quarterback in Noah Fafita, who is just far more limited as a passer than Michael Penix is.
Mm-hmm.
It's not good. It's not good. I think the best thing you can say when you look at the matchup here is that, well, you just gave up 49 points to Cal, but like, how many more points can you actually give up? That's as we've been saying this year. Like, just because you gave up those points to Cal doesn't mean that Washington, who is 20% better on offense than Cal, or even 40% better on offense than Cal, is going to score 40% more points. That's sort of not the way it works. USC has to still just face the matchup in front of them. And the one good thing here to circle is the rushing game. This is a Washington team that is not very interested in running the ball and has not been particularly effective at running the ball. And the plus side for USC is that they've been extremely vulnerable to the run throughout this season.
Mm-hmm.
And that vulnerability has set them up to get in trouble in a lot of other ways. You look at the way the Cal game started, it's because the run game can't stop Jaden Knott. I don't know that will have to be something that USC is terribly concerned about in this game, because it will just be a passing attack.
Yeah.
But I also want to highlight one thing, like, just because Washington chooses not to run a lot, just because Washington is like, you know what, we have Michael Penix and Rome Odunze, and we're just going to chuck it around.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that they can't establish a run game. You look at the Oregon matchup that Washington had, they run the ball 40 times in that game. They had 204 rushing yards in that game. They averaged 5.1 yards per carry in that game. So
I think you're looking at the defense.
Am I looking at the defense?
Yeah. They ran the ball 23 times for 99 yards.
Okay. Well,
4.3.
Scratch that. So 4.3 yards per carry. 4.3 yards per carry is not terrible for a team that just sort of isn't that interested in running. Arizona State's the one that really shut down their rushing attack, and I think it shows in that being the worst offensive performance of the season for Washington. But USC doesn't have a defense that's capable of shutting down a rushing attack to the point where they can't even hand the ball off. So, yeah, I don't know.
So,
I don't know.
What is the game plan here? Because we've talked about it before, that the game plan should have been for sort of a flawed offense like Utah and Cal, that the game plan should have been force the quarterback who is embattled, or maybe new in Mendoza's case, young and raw, force them to beat you, right? Like try to the game plan in hindsight should have been stack the box, force them to throw on you. And if they throw on you, tip your cap, whatever, but do not give up the run because you know that they're going to lean on the run. I don't think you can possibly do that against Washington, right? Like you can, they're already giving you the run stoppage by not running as much as they could. So you just sit back and just defend the pass and just let them run. Like you just let them run into light boxes if they want to, because at that point they're not throwing the ball to Odunze and Penix is not beating you with his arm, and you just sort of force him into the run, and you just go into like a, do you just run like a 1-5-5 defense or something like that? Like what do you do here? How do you game plan to face this defense when they're so different than anything else SC has faced all year?
Well, that's the problem though, is have we ever seen USC sell out to try and stop the pass?
No, like this is the difference between Grinch and Pendergast. Is Pendergast's thing, like his little defensive kink was to go all in on forcing you to do one thing, and take away your strength, right? Grinch, we haven't seen that with Grinch at all.
No, and I don't know that I expect him to do that in this game, although that would be inviting Washington to run, doing to Washington what teams do and have done to USC, where they say, you know what, fine, we don't want to get beat by your quarterback, and we don't want to get beat by your receivers, so we're just gonna, drop 8 and see if you'll run and see if you decline to run, like USC has done to a frustrating degree. But you have to be willing to do that. And it feels like it goes counter to everything that Alex Grinch believes in, which I fully expect USC to be overly aggressive in this game and pin their ears back and try to get to the quarterback. But like USC hasn't been good enough at that. And a quarterback like Michael Penix is good enough to counteract that with all the ways that you can counteract that, by getting the ball out quickly, by having poise in the pocket, by doing screens and misdirection and all of those kinds of things. We haven't seen USC adjust to those kinds of attacks from an offense. So I think, as Rama Murdy in the chat says, blitz like crazy and hope to force turnovers. That is 1,000,000% what I expect from the defense in this game. I 100% expect USC to go out and say, screw it, we're just going to try and get as much pressure and create as much havoc as possible. And there's a universe where that works, I suppose, but it hasn't been working in 9 games this season. Well, maybe one or 2 games it's worked. I would rather see them go outside the box and do like you're saying, where, force Washington to have to try and to run the ball and take the ball out of Michael Penix's hands.
Yeah.
But even then, let's say USC does that. Do I trust that USC's defense is well drilled enough to, if Kalen DeBoer recognizes, okay, look at they're selling out to stop the run, they're selling out to stop the pass, let's just run the ball. Am I confident enough in USC's defensive front? Am I confident enough in USC's tackling for that not to backfire on USC as well? Like I just think this is a incredibly difficult matchup that I don't know if plan A or plan B is truly viable when you just look at what we know about USC's defense and what we know about Washington's offense.
Well, let me kick this one out to you. Turnovers. Washington has struggled with turnovers. His turnover margin in the month of October, it was -6. They've had a positive turnover margin in only 2 games this year. That was week 1 against Boise State, week 4 against Cal. they are not forcing turnovers, but they are prone to sort of giving the ball away. 4 turnovers in that game 2 weeks ago against ASU.
Somebody, Kenny in the chat asked, what did ASU do to shut them down? Like 4 turnovers is the answer.
Yeah, they didn't. I wish I would have gone back and watched the Matthew Loves Ball version of that game, and I didn't. But looking at the numbers here, ASU had 5 tackles for loss and no sacks. They forced 4 turnovers. So how did those turnovers? What was it? Was it them sitting back, or was it them being overly aggressive and maybe not making havoc outside of the turnovers? I don't know enough. I didn't watch that game, but like the turnovers are possible, and I think that's the key for SC in this game is if they do get the turnovers, because you can look at it one way and say, hey, yeah, SC gave up 49 points to a formerly third string quarterback in Fernando Mendoza, who was making his second career start. And so then what is Michael Penix, who's a 6-year senior who has tons of experience in this offense because Kalen DeBoer was his offensive coordinator in Indiana and all that. What is that going to bode for SC's defense? It's got to be even worse, right? And then I think you can also look at it and say, Cal scored on 4 straight drives in that first half. In the Colorado game, Colorado scored on something like 5 straight drives in the second half. SC has already been gashed to smithereens. Washington can't necessarily do more than anyone has already done. They can. They obviously can.
Score 60.
They can score 60. They can score 70. Yes, I agree with you. But like SC's already been blown to smithereens multiple times on defense. And so like we've already seen it. So like is it truly going to be that much different than anything else? I don't know. But it's terrifying nonetheless for this defense when you look at all the guys that they've got to figure out a way to cover. I think the difficult part for Washington here, when you look at how to defend them, is that they remind me of the 2019 Trojans, where that was air raid style offense under Graham Harrell, right? They weren't going to run the ball that much, but they were going to want to throw the ball a lot. And they had the 3-headed triumvirate of Michael Pittman, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Tyler Vance. And this other guy named Drake London. I don't know if you've ever heard of him too. 4-headed monster receiving core. What did that mean? It meant dudes were always open, because if you double teamed Mike Williams, he played like Mike Williams. If you double teamed Michael Pittman, Amon-Ra was open. You double teamed Vaughns, well then Pittman was open. You double teamed any of those other dudes, and then London was open, right? This is what that receiving core is like for UW. If you put all of your emphasis on stopping Odunze, well then Polk and McMillan are going to eat. Like, that's the difficult part. This isn't like a Lane Kiffin style receiving core where there is Robert Woods and that's it, or there's Marquise Lee and that's it. This isn't that thing. Like, there are so many dudes that they can beat you in the air that even though they don't have the running game to sort of mix in with the passing game, I think the passing game is dynamic enough with all the targets that they can throw out there, including the tight end Westover. And there's multiple tight ends that they'll even use, that they can sort of spread it around that way and beat you that way. So the key for SC is to emulate whatever the hell Arizona State did. Try to find the funk that Arizona brought to them in Tucson a few weeks ago when they held them to 31. Try to, get the magic of what Stanford did last week and nearly beat them, and then let your offense go to work on this Washington defense. I think that's going to be SC's game plan, because if this is a shootout, then yeah, SC has a puncher's chance because SC at quarterback has Caleb Williams. So
and SC's at home, and that does count for something.
yeah.
But everything boils down to USC's defense has not gotten
the
stops that they've needed to get this year.
Right.
And the thing you can at least say about the Cal game is that they came out and got turnovers. And basically USC needs to not just win the turnover battle, because Washington has gotten really good at winning games despite losing the turnover battle. They've lost the turnover battle.
That's the scary part. Yeah.
They need to win the turnover battle the way that like Notre Dame won the turnover battle against USC. Like it needs to just be
decisive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that, I think that's the scariest thing too, is that, yes, I think that's the key to beating Washington, is forcing turnovers and forcing them to play a game that isn't clean. But they still win even when they get into those situations. And I think that you put it all together, and I'm sitting here looking at everything, and there's no football reason. There's no football reason for SC's defense to play up to this Washington offense. And there's no football reason for SC to win this game. There just isn't. Like I don't know what else to tell you. Like turnovers and outscore them and all those things. But Washington is just better at everything that SC does. So let's get into USC's offense, because the Trojans do have the reigning Heisman Trophy winner going up against a Washington defense that is good, not great. 32nd in SP Plus rankings. They're led by a bunch of dudes. I don't think there's one star player here that is worth the say Michael Penix pedestal that the offense has, or the Rome Odunze pedestal that the offense has. But there's just a bunch of good dudes on defense. At linebacker, there's Ed Unfuon Ulofoshio. Writing that out in the pronunciation guide doesn't make it easier to read.
Edufuon Ulofoshio. Ulofoshio.
Yeah. See,
Ulofoshio. I think it's you can get there.
But the problem is writing it in the rundown with the pronunciation guide thing in there, it doesn't actually
just
help.
Sort of slows you down.
Yeah, it just slows you down. 57 tackles, a pick, 3.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. He's the lead guy right there, inside linebacker. On the defensive line, there's a familiar name, Latuli Gasanoa.
This is great.
One of the greatest names of all time.
We had to learn how to say his name in recruiting, so it's great.
I loved it. I was so sad when SC didn't get him, because his name is it just rolls. Latuli Gasanoa.
It's a great name. 100%.
It's great.
And he's become a pretty solid defensive tackle.
Yeah.
USC could have definitely used.
Yeah, he's your space eater. 7 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, but he's been a key contributor for the Huskies, even though he's not necessarily been productive in the stat book. Braylon Trice is sort of that guy on the edge. 3.5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, 6 hurries. They have a couple different little wrinkles on their depth charts. There's a Husky position, which is sort of like a nickel hybrid linebacker safety thing. And that's Mishael Powell, a guy to keep an eye on. A couple of picks so far this year. Jabbar Muhammad at corner is probably the guy to circle, because he's the team leader in tackles for loss and pass breakups. 6 pass breakups, 5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks as a corner. So he will blitz you off the edge, which I think could be something to worry about for SC, because if he's able to just jam into the backfield, and we've seen times where Caleb Williams has either one of two things. Either he has an eternity to sit there and throw, or he's just has no time and he's got to get out of the pocket ASAP. And I think if you add a corner blitz to that might be interesting from a defensive perspective. And I don't know how SC would handle those things. So could you see more plays where, say, the running back is in to block and have to try to see if Muhammad comes in crashing in? Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. But The biggest problem for Washington's defense, biggest problem, I guess, is that they are susceptible to the pass. They're 118th in pass defense, 264 yards per game. They also do not cause a lot of havoc. They're 120th in tackles for loss per game, 126th in sacks per game, only 1.3 sacks per game. Their season high was last week with 3 against Stanford. They hadn't had more than 1 since week 3. They struggle on third down defensively. They're 97th in the country at allowing 41.7% conversions for their opponents. And they're not forcing turnovers. Washington is one of 2 teams in FBS who have yet to recover a fumble on defense, Indiana being the other. And they've also forced 1 fumble all season. Stanford is the only other team that has forced 1, and those 2 are tied for dead last in FBS. So they're not putting teams into positions to make mistakes. And I think that's one of the areas where it has allowed Arizona to hang around with them in Tucson as they did last month. It's allowed ASU to stick around, even though ASU's offense is boober sauce. It allowed them to stick around and nearly win that game. It allowed Stanford, who has been absolutely jiggle-bagged by SC and Oregon and multiple teams this year, and yet they had a fighting chance to beat Washington. So Washington's defense, good, not great, flawed, not flawed nearly on the level that SC's defense is, but flawed nonetheless.
Yeah, this is a weird defense. This is a weird defense because they bend quite a bit. They give up yards. They let teams move down the field on them. One thing that they've done a significantly better job than USC on is red zone defense. They're not like elite in red zone defense, but they are top 30. I think they're 31st in red zone defense. That's a big difference from, for instance, where USC is in that metric, all the way down like 123rd. It matters that when the field gets small, when the spaces get tighter, that they're getting stops and USC isn't. But they are vulnerable. And they have shown cracks in the armor against teams like Stanford, which is sort of not a team that you would expect to be able to be putting up points on a Washington defense. They gave up quite a lot of points to Cal, for instance. As much as we talk about USC's performance against Cal in this game defensively, and it was indefensible, I'm gonna add, but Cal put up 32 points on this Washington defense. They've given up 33 points to Stanford. They have weird vulnerabilities. Statistically, they don't make sense, this defense. Specifically because, there's some stats going around about how they've been outgained in the last 3 games and they've won. The opposing offenses are moving the ball just fine. Opposing offenses are having joy in the passing game just fine. But they're getting the key stops when they need them in ways that we're just not seeing from USC, which is what sort of scares me quite a bit. Because if USC was a defense that just let you roll down the field and still got the stops that they needed, we would be having very, very different conversations. And the front half of the 2022 season is sort of a really good example of that, where USC was letting opposing teams drive, but they were getting so many turnovers that effectively they were getting the stops that they needed, and that works out. And then suddenly the turnovers dry up and you have no sort of answer for that. But it's not like Washington is just depending on turnovers. This defense is not turnover dependent in the slightest. So they're getting just, good old fashioned stops in the red zone. And they're not vulnerable to the big play, in at least not in the same way that USC is. Like, they're giving up big plays. It's sort of why they're a middling defense. But the difference between Washington being a middling defense and USC being a catastrophically bad defense is really on that. And I keep comparing it to USC's just specifically because USC's defense has to face Washington's offense, and Washington's offense is elite, and USC's defense is catastrophic. USC's offense is also elite, and they're facing a Washington defense that isn't good, but they're not catastrophic. So the balance here in the matchup is a problem.
So I think it's interesting because I think this is the kind of defense that I think would be perfect for SC's offense to have.
Well, you certainly take this over what USC's given you now.
No, yes, because like when you look at it, you're like, well, they don't cause havoc plays. They don't get third down stops. They like how do they force? They don't force turnovers. Like how do they get off the field? Like, and the answer is they just bend don't break because it's just. Yeah, the percentages aren't well on third downs, but if you force enough third downs, you're going to get a stop, and that's what this defense is bend don't break like you mentioned. And so if you match that kind of defense with what SC has on offense, I think SC is, a playoff contender. And lo and behold, you match this defense with what Washington has on offense, and guess what? They're a playoff contender, right? Like this is what it is. So this is a defense that is, I think, susceptible to playing in a shootout. I mean, Stanford essentially created a shootout up on the farm last week. So it's an opportunity for SC to sort of try to get things going on offense. We saw the offense at times last week look really good and bounce back against Cal after having a few weeks of struggles. But SC scored 50 points and still punted 7 times last week. They can get much better on offense. We need to see Caleb Williams in more of a rhythm than he has been. He threw for 369 yards last week, 2 straight games where he hasn't thrown an interception, but he's got to still get in that rhythm where we saw him like at Rice Eccles last year in a tough spot where he threw 5 touchdowns and the USC offense looked unstoppable, which is why Kyle Whittingham went for 2 at the end of the game, right? Like SC's got to get into that sort of rhythm on offense if they're going to play a role of spoiler in this one. So can they do that? I think it's the question, because when looking back at the Oregon game, I thought they held Bo Nix in check just about as well as they could have. Bo Nix did not look insanely great in that game. I think Bo Nix looked like an absolute competitor and didn't make any major mistakes, but he didn't look like necessarily a Heisman contender, like Penix did against Oregon. And part of that is because Penix just had the big money moment at the end of the game.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought that Oregon really had to fight for their yards against Washington way more than Oregon did. Or way more than Washington did against Oregon. So, because Washington was able to make bigger plays in that game. If that's the same thing, if they force Caleb Williams to sort of grind it out, then SC is really going to be up against a tall task here, because I don't know that SC will be able to match that defensively and force Penix to sort of grind it out, because we know that SC is susceptible to giving up big plays, a lot of big plays. So, it's going to be an interesting matchup. We'll see how that goes for SC on offense against the Husky defense. Any last thoughts before we get to over-under?
USC's offense gives them a chance in this game if USC's offense is efficient. And I think that one of the things that it's been very frustrating and concerning about USC's offense recently is they have not been very efficient.
Yeah.
And especially against a defense like Washington that sort of wants to use your efficiency against you, because they'll let you move the ball ever so slightly. But like you said, like they'll force you into third downs, and then eventually you're gonna mess up. And the thing that's been frustrating is particularly on third downs, but also just like in big moments, Caleb has not necessarily been as accurate as you need him to be. And he needs to be accurate in this game, especially on third down. when there are opportunities to keep the chains moving, USC can't be the one that's making the mistake. Force Washington to make the play that stops the chains from moving.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So the other thing to mention about UW really quick, special teams, very good on special teams. In SP Plus, they're 14th in the country on special teams. One of the areas which SC is great is punt returns, right? With Zachariah Branch. This is the nuttiest stat I've ever seen. Washington has allowed 4 punts this year. Exactly 4 punt returns. Sorry, 4 punt returns they've allowed. Michigan State had a 1-yard return. That is a season high. Cal had a loss of 2. Arizona had a loss of 1. And Oregon had a 0-yard return.
A season high punt return of 1.
A season high punt return of 1.
Yeah.
Over 4 punt returns. Yeah. As a whole, they've allowed 4 punt returns for a total of negative 2 yards.
Yeah.
Which is nutty. Absolutely nutty.
That's fun.
But let's get to over under, shall we?
So you're going over.
I'm feeling bold. Give me that over.
I'll go under. I got to take an under here. I got 3 unders to take.
I'm going to do an under here.
All right, let's get to over under, where I have a big lead. I'm 31-23. You are 24-30 coming into this one. Alicia, I think you're sort of up against it. So you got to get creative. And you've got to hope things go in your favor. How are you going to start that? What's your first over under?
By not being creative. Going back to the well.
All right.
14.5 Marshawn Lloyd carries. It was lovely seeing him get 17 against Cal this past weekend. He got 15 against Arizona. He got 14 against ASU. USC is 4-0 in games where Marshawn Lloyd has 13 or more carries, which is fun. And you know, this might be a game where USC needs to play a little ball control. Maybe keep the ball out of Michael Penix's hands as much as possible. So will USC go back to the well and see about establishing the run and really feeding the running back and make that a point of emphasis? Washington has a better rush defense than Cal. They rank 58th, giving up 135.6 yards per game compared to Cal. Coming into that game was 70th with 145.8 yards per game, for what it's worth. But that Washington rush defense is not so great, so elite that you can't even imagine running into the teeth of that defense. So will we see USC establish the run?
I'm going to say yes. I think so. I think that, especially given how big of a fourth quarter he had last week, it was huge. It was a big reason why SC won the game was because of Marshawn Lloyd and what he was able to do. And so I'm going to say over on carries by Marshawn Lloyd. Yeah. Give me the over there. My first over under is over under 4.52 Washington yards per carry. This has been an interesting one because UW has been averaging only 4.24 yards per carry. We know that they choose not to run. USC's defense is allowing 4.52 yards per carry on the season. So there's the line, 4.52. Washington's highest yards per carry average in Pac-12 play was 4.67 against Cal, but that was way back in week 4. SC allowed 5.6 to Cal last week, but Jay Nunn is the Pac-12 leading rusher. Washington doesn't have a Pac-12 leading rusher, and they choose not to run. So, but this is average. This is not total yards. This is 4.52 yards per carry for the Huskies. What say you?
Smashing the over on this. I do not trust USC's rush defense at all. I do not think this is a game where USC is going to sell out to stop the run. I think that if anything, USC should be inviting Washington to run on them. And like I said earlier, even if you do that, I still think that your defensive front has not proven that they are capable of controlling the line of scrimmage and your linebackers aren't capable of hitting the right hole or reading the play properly enough to get up there and make stops at the line of scrimmage. So I am taking the over on this with extremely high confidence.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't know though. This is one of those things where I think that if SC wins this game, I think that this might be one of the stats you look to. At the same time, Washington just doesn't run to the point that I don't know that the rushing numbers matter. Either way, 4.52 doesn't sound terrible on the surface. So if you hold Washington to even an over there, I think there's a chance SC still has a puncher's chance in this game. But still, of course, as we've talked about before, no football reason for SC to win this game. Let's get to your next one. What do you got?
149.5 receiving yards for any one Washington receiver. So the idea behind this is that USC has given up 196 yards as the season high for any receiver against them. But everybody else has been sort of just under 150. Sione Vake had 149. Tetairoa McMillan had 138. Nevada's Jamal Bell had 121. Meanwhile, Rome Odunze has had 180 against Michigan State. Jalen Polk has had 148 against Stanford. Those are their season highs. I think we all look at this matchup and expect Washington's passing attack to be prolific, but will they be able to just destroy USC with one guy the way that we saw with Colorado? And Sione, if I was doing all-purpose yards, like Sione Vake would be way up there, Jay Knott would be way up there, all of that. I just wanted to keep it simple with receiving yards. So will USC give up 150 yards or more to a Washington receiver?
So you mentioned Omarion Miller as the guy that had 196 receiving yards for Colorado. All of that in the second half. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
You know how many yards he's had since?
He's probably had like 20 yards.
2 catches for 16.
Yeah.
Nutty. Absolutely nutty. So SC gave up 149 receiving yards to Sione Vake, and 196 to Omarion Miller. And I think that there's reason for you to put the line there, and I get it. But Odunze is the only one that's done it this year for the Huskies. And it was a $180 against a Michigan State team that is terrible. Mind you, SC's defense is not great either. We know that Jalen McMillan is sort of questionable health-wise. He was supposed to go against Stanford last week, but ended up leaving with a limp. So, he's questionable there. I just think they got too many dudes for me to say yes that one dude is going to get the 149. And the fact that they've only done it one time all year to have a receiver over 149 tells me it's under. It's under. The receiving core there's just too many guys, even if McMillan is injured and not able to go or whatever.
I'm happy for you to take that under. Rome Odunze is second nationally in receiving plays of 20 plus yards this season.
Mm-hmm.
I think he could pull a Jay Knott here and get this in one quarter.
He could. He absolutely could. I do not doubt that for a minute. Yeah.
As a random factoid I want to share, USC has the top receivers in the Pac-12 that USC has faced this year. Stanford's Amonor, Colorado's Xavier Weaver, Arizona's Tetairoa McMillan. None of those guys scored touchdowns on USC, which I just think was really interesting. Now, to be fair, Jacob Cowing, half of his touchdowns this season came against USC. He has 4 this year. Oh, sorry, he has 8 this year. 4 of them came against USC. So it's not like dudes aren't scoring touchdowns.
And Cowing left that game injured too.
Yeah,
that's the crazy part.
But I do think it's funny. I was just sort of trying to like compare USC's performance against other top receivers for the rest of the programs that USC has faced this year. And they haven't really done they haven't really gotten dunked on by these guys. So I don't know. That's not to say that they aren't getting dunked on in general in defensively, just not by individuals except for like Amarian Miller, who just went crazy, and Sione Vaki, who like just went crazy because USC kept putting a defensive end on him in coverage. So
yeah, but I think Vaki is an interesting mention here, but just so different than what Washington is going to do.
He's not a wide receiver. There's no comparison to Odunze or to Polk.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Let's go to my next over-under, which is over-under 17.5. 10-plus yard gains for Washington. The Huskies are number 3 in FBS in 10-plus yard gains, with 148 this season. They are averaging 18.5 per game. 32.5% of Washington's plays have gained 10-plus yards. That's insane. Washington's also number 1 in FBS with 58.4% of their plays gaining 7-plus yards, which is unfathomable. Meanwhile, SC is 130th in the country in allowing 10-plus yard games, allowing 14.4. So it's 10-plus yard gains, 17.5 is the line. Do they get the over?
Washington. Smash that over. Smashing it. It's over. Extreme confidence. It will be over.
Okay.
This 60%, almost 60% of their plays this season have gone for 7 or more yards. Like USC's defense is at least giving up 18. At least.
All right. Let's go to your last over under. What do you got?
I'm going 99.5 receiving yards for Taj Washington. He has had 100 receiving yards in each of the last 2 games. He's looking for his 3rd consecutive 100 receiving yard game. The last USC wide receiver to have 3 consecutive 100 yard receiving games was Drake London in 2021. And my God, you look at Drake London's stats in 2021 before his injury. It's absurd. It is absurd what his numbers were. He would have run away with the Biletnikoff if he had stayed healthy. If not, been a wide receiver who won the Heisman if he stayed healthy.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're keeping this pretty simple. Will Taj Washington pop up for another 100-yard game? I think it's noteworthy at this point that you have to look at it and say that USC, their number 1 receiver is Taj Washington. I think that Brendan Rice is clearly a valuable target for USC, but they don't seem to want to give him volume.
Yeah.
Notably, he's been a big red zone threat for USC. As a side note here, that he has 9 touchdowns in 9 games this year. That's the most by a USC wide receiver since Michael Pittman in a season. So in 2019, Michael Pittman had 11 touchdowns in a season. So Brendan Rice has been a very strong red zone playmaker for USC, but Taj Washington is wide receiver number 1. And I worry that USC needs so much more from the other guys in this receiving core that if it's just Taj Washington being wide receiver number 1, that's not enough.
Yeah, I think the thing about Taj is I love when something that you notice anecdotally ends up being true, like objectively true statistically. And one of those things is I've been joking about like there's your weekly 40-yard catch from Taj Washington or whatever. Like he just has a bunch of those. I looked it up. He literally leads the country in 40-yard catches this year with 7. He's tied with Colin Lacey from South Alabama with 7. I think that given how Washington is a defense that is susceptible to giving up passing yards, and given that Taj Washington is the deep shot guy for SC, I think there absolutely is room for him to get the 99 or get the 100 yards here. So give me the over, especially when he's sort of developed as SC's number one option, like you mentioned. Mario Williams is nowhere to be found in terms of, like, I know the criticism has been on Dorian Singer, and for rightful reasons. Like, Dorian Singer was first team All Pac-12 receiver last year, right? Mario Williams hasn't been anywhere either. So statistically,
I was thinking about that today too. Like, I was thinking, what is it about Dorian Singer that just hasn't translated to USC? And I thought, well, maybe it's just not. He hasn't built up enough chemistry with Caleb Caleb maybe doesn't have trust to throw him those 50-50 balls that he made a living on at Arizona, and something like that. And maybe that explains Dorian Singer just not being there for USC. But Mario Williams has been playing with Caleb Williams for too many years for there not to be for that to be an excuse for him. Like, that, chemistry should not be even slightly an issue when it comes to Mario Williams' lack of production this year. It's been strange.
yeah, for sure. Let's go to my last over under, which is over under 4.5 Lake McCree catches. Lake McCree, the last 2 weeks, 3 catches for 35 yards against Utah. He had a season high 4 catches for 71 yards against Cal. I love that RPO that SC tends to run a couple times per game, where they have Lake McCree just right up the seam. I love that play so much. It resulted in a interception against Notre Dame, but I love that thing. Could there be more opportunities for Lake McCree in this game? We'll see. Can he set a season high in terms of catches? Over under 4.5 for Lake McCree.
I'm going under on this just because the way that we've seen the tight end be used in this offense, it's not volume. I think that Lake McCree could have a very good game, a game equivalent to the Cal game, and feel very good about the usage that Lake McCree had in the passing game at 4 catches. I don't know that USC is going to necessarily, feed him the ball considerably, especially when there are so many other wide receivers that we're talking about who aren't getting fed the ball. So I'm just taking an under on this. I think I'd be perfectly happy with 4 catches from him without expecting 5.
Yeah, I think that's valid. I was debating putting this line at 3.5. If I'm to put it at 3.5, are you taking the over?
No.
Okay, I could have got away with it. Oh boy. All right. Let's get to our game predictions. Alicia, what do you got?
I have Washington 45, USC 38. I think the problem here is that I'm being very, very conservative with giving Washington 45 points. The 2 best quarterbacks that USC has faced in the last 2 seasons were Cam Rising and Dorian Thompson-Robinson. And they averaged, 347 yards, 3 touchdowns through the air in 3 meetings with those 3 quarterbacks. Michael Penix is a better passer than either of them by a long shot.
Yeah.
The Washington passing offense is better than either of those passing offenses by a long shot. It is far and away the best passing offense that USC has faced, far and away the best offense in general that USC has faced. I do not feel confident in USC's defense giving USC a chance here. On the flip side, I think everyone seems to agree that USC has a chance in this game specifically because of Caleb Williams and because of USC's offense and the vulnerability of Washington's defense. The problem I have with going all in on that is that Washington's defense has been susceptible to breaking at times in games, but to the tune of 30 plus points. They aren't breaking the way USC's defense is breaking for 40 points in a bad outing for them.
Mm-hmm.
They held Oregon to 33 points. Oregon's offense as we've seen against a really good defense like Utah, as we've seen throughout the season, Oregon's offense is extremely good. And the fact that Oregon's offense only put up 33 points in a game where they were efficient, where they didn't turn the ball over, where they were effective on third down, it doesn't make sense that Oregon's offense could be that efficient and not make any major mistakes in that sense and still only come away with 33 points. And the only thing that you point to there is they were 0 of 3 on fourth down, which is sort of what I was getting at with Washington's defense. They're not pretty, but they have been very good at just getting the stops that they need to get to win the game. So I don't even like the matchup with USC's offense against this defense. So I wish I could pick an upset here, guys. I really wish I could, but USC's defense is not going to let me pick an upset for the rest of the season.
Yeah, no, I feel you. I agree because there's no football reason that SC should win this game. Michael Penix is the best quarterback USC will have faced since Marcus Mariota. Is that crazy?
I'm gonna do Cam Rising the respect of saying that Cam Rising, in terms of being a gamer, in terms of making plays, in terms of being that dude, is the best quarterback that USC has faced. But if we're talking about passers of the football, pro prospects, etc., then yeah, maybe that's fair.
I guess you can say Justin Herbert, but I think that when Justin Herbert
in college was not the
same. It's not the same.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
Justin Herbert obviously was ended up being a high level prospect who has panned out in the NFL. Yes,
yeah.
But I don't think it's quite the same. Michael Penix is the best college quarterback to come to the Coliseum since Marcus Mariota in 2012. And what did that team do to SC in 2012? The Kenyon Barner game, the Marcus Mariota game. It was a crazy shootout in which SC could not get off the field. It's the thing that essentially got Monty Kiffin fired, even though he got fired later on, a couple weeks later. It was the sort of a similar situation, right? SC was coming into that game as a 2-loss team who still had a chance in 2012, still had a chance to go somewhere in the conference, but they didn't because they lost that game, and then everything else further spiraled, and they ended up going 7-5 in the regular season. If they would have beaten Oregon, I think they would have gotten the momentum to go on and maybe finish 9-3, 10-2. But they didn't. They lost to Oregon and fell off a cliff.
Yeah.
Yes. And it was a game which SC valiantly played with Matt Barkley. They scored a lot of points, but it was a shootout they could never get close with. And I think that's kind of what SC is looking at in this game. Michael Penix is leading this offense that has too many weapons, too much firepower. There is no football reason in the world to pick SC in this game. When you look at SC's defense, just made Fernando Mendoza look like he was a Pro Bowler. This is the defense that made Bryson Barnes, a guy who had a 107 quarterback rating coming in that game, have a career high $181 and beat SC with a 20-something yard scramble on a do or die drive in which he was going to be forced to throw the football, and he ended up running anyways. A guy who wasn't a runner that we could talk about going into that game, wasn't someone that you had to worry about. And here comes Washington. And if Cal can score 49 points on this SC defense, what the hell is Washington going to do? There's no football reason in the world to pick the Huskies. Sorry, to pick the Trojans. There just isn't. But that's why I'm doing it. Because SC, there is nothing more USC than winning this game. After the season has gone absolutely to crap, the defense has been gassed. They've been brutalized. This is their, like, the defense can't play much worse. Like, we already know what this defense is. They gave up 49 points to Cal. Like, they gave up so many drives in a row. This is a Washington team that is susceptible to giving up turnovers. This is a Washington team that struggled to beat ASU and Stanford. If that continues, I think SC has the ability to play at home, get the crowd in here. It's a sold-out Coliseum. It's homecoming. And the other thing is, there's nothing more Pac-12 than the Pac-12 eating itself. Like, this is the most Pac-12 thing ever, is for the Pac-12 to eat itself. Like, here is a perfect opportunity. Washington and Oregon have a great opportunity to go to the playoff. Nothing makes more sense than SC beating Washington this week, getting jiggle-bagged in Eugene next week. Like, that's going to happen undoubtedly. We all know that one. But SC's getting the Huskies this week, because nothing is more fitting than SC finally putting it together this week and then laying an egg next week. Trojans beat Washington 52-49. Same score as the UCLA game last year. Nearly the same score as last week's Cal game. SC wins 52-49. Same score as the Rose Bowl in 2017. So there we go. All right, let's get to... You got thoughts?
As soon as you started saying no football reasons, I knew where this was going. I wish I had the faith that you had.
I don't have faith.
One thing I know. Here's the thing I know. Michael Penix is not throwing an interception to Corey Foreman, who is out of position and randomly in a place on the field. That's all I know.
There's no football reason for him to do that. I agree. But I've also seen SC beat Utah when they had no football reason to do it. They did it. SC, weirdly, when you have no faith in SC, that's when SC does stuff.
I would love for this to be a YOLO ball game, but I don't think this is a YOLO ball game, and I don't think USC is a YOLO ball team. But yeah,
we'll see. All right, let's get to the old mailbag, shall we?
You've got mail.
All right, we got to start with a super chat that we got.
Hey.
Big thanks on the super chat to JXB1A2. Almost sounds like a hex code of a color, but it's not, because a J's in there, so it doesn't quite work.
Jixpo102.
Sure. And they say, I think that we all accept that the Huskies will score lots, but if the defense can make critical stops and plays with heart and conviction, not just running around aimlessly without direction, SC can pull the upset.
And the one thing that we have been saying about USC's defense is, for all their faults, for all the things they're not good at, they have played with heart and they have played with effort for 4 quarters every game this season. There are multiple games this season where the defense could have literally just laid down and died. And they've come out in, Arizona is a good example.
Yeah.
Cal is a good example of games where they came out in the 4th quarter and continue to play with heart and belief. And I will give them that. I simply do not think they are capable of making the stops they need to make.
Kalen Bullock has had big moments. He's he makes big plays. I know
interception against Utah felt like Nickel Roby.
It did. Yeah. You've talked about it before, that like Kalen Bullock can sort of go transparent at times.
Kalen Bullock,
but he's
is good.
So visible when he is visible, right?
Kalen Bullock is good for 2 incredible, what a great plays.
The Arizona game. He made a big play.
And 2 touchdowns that the opposing team scores every game where you're like, where was Kalen Bullock on that play? And that's just sort of what USC's defense is. So that's...
But the more he makes the crazy big plays, though, the more I think that this is the defense putting him in the wrong spot.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he is a pro prospect that people talk about with glowing terms.
Yes.
And you just know he's going to go to the NFL and be good. And we're going to look around going like, well, yeah, it wasn't a him problem. It was a defensive problem.
Yeah. And I think that if there's a moment for him to have his big moment, this could be it, because he excels in defending the pass. I think he is not Talanoa Hufanga, who excels against the run, and will make plays against the run and the pass. Bullock isn't that guy. He defends the pass well, and this is an opportunity for him with so many throws out there to have his moment. and I think it'll be if he has a big game, that bodes huge for us.
That's a really good point, because my whole thing with Kalen Bullock this whole time has been, let him just play as a center fielder and do that. And all of the plays that I look at Kalen Bullock with frustration are running plays where he's coming up with a terrible angle and then either missing a tackle or not being anywhere near being able to make a tackle on Jaden Ott as he's running away. And I don't think that that's Washington's game. So yeah, this is set up to be a Kalen Bullock game.
Yeah,
that'll be fun.
Big super chat. Thank you to Alex. Also, you guys are awesome with the super chats.
Alex.
Staying hydrated over here, like you can't.
Staying caffeinated over here.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get to a voicemail that we got from Aaron.
Hi, Michael and Alicia. This is Aaron from Boston. I had a quick question relating to something you were discussing during your last CarCast. You pointed out that it's tougher playing defense on a Lincoln Riley team because Lincoln Riley offenses just get off the field incredibly fast. I was looking at the stats this morning, and it looks like their average time of possession this year is 104th in the nation. They're just scoring right away, or if they're not scoring, they're getting off the field quickly. And so the defense is facing a lot more drives, and so they're going to allow more points. They're going to allow more yards. And so my question for you is, what is the fair way to measure the performance of a Lincoln Riley defense? I'm not defending Alex Grinch and his performance this year, but sometimes it does seem like he's being assessed unfairly as to which statistics we're measuring it by. You know, the yards they allow are always going to be higher. The points they allow are always going to be higher, just given how much time they're spending on the field. And so what do you think is the fair way we should be measuring Alex Grinch's performance this year? Thank you.
Lisa, do you have any thoughts? Because I've prepared some stuff.
My thoughts are that there does seem to be some truth that to the idea that the more explosive your offense, the harder it is for your defense to statistically thrive. That bears out in just a lot of ways. I'm not sure that like correlation and causation are always correctly applied. As Malcolm in the chat says, defenses aren't weaker after short possessions. That's a myth. Like I tend to think more about how that the idea that because your offense scores quickly that your defense is then going to be susceptible. I don't necessarily buy that. I think that you might end up in a position where the opposing offense has to be more aggressive because they're chasing your offense, and that might result in more explosive plays or just more chances taken by them. But when it comes to like statistical measures and Alex Grinch or a Lincoln Riley defensive coordinator, I think that you might get a little bit he might get a little bit of relief by looking at per play, per drive kind of like stats.
Yeah.
But that relief is so minuscule to me at this point because the defense is just bad. And the defense is bad because it's bad, not because you could have, Iowa's offense on the other side of this defense, and this defense would still be actively bad.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of where I'm at. But you have a bunch of statistics to back up a sort of idea here.
Yeah. First of all, I don't know anything about what the conclusion of what I'm about to present is. I think this is one of those things where like this was interesting to me, but I don't know what the clear takeaway is. So this is open to interpretation. But I think the basis of the answer, by the way, is go on per play and per drive. Don't use totals, because you look at okay, we mentioned Oregon earlier, right? Well, 2012 Oregon, was a Chip Kelly's last year was a year in which Oregon averaged 28 minutes per game on offense, right? 2014 Oregon, which was Helfrich's second year, the year that went to the playoff, Oregon was 121st in time of possession. And then you look at total defense for Oregon in that year. where is it? I just had it. Oregon was 89th in total defense in terms of yards per game. If you look at yards per play, they were 64th. And like that's sort of the comp that you continued to see over teams that were high octane, like lots of like less time, is that the yards per play average will be better than the yards per game average in terms of rankings because there's just fewer plays that other teams are facing versus there's teams that have offenses where they're going to be put out more on defense, right? They got to face more plays that way, right? And so I ended up putting together some stats. So if you're watching here on YouTube, you're about to see these stats here on the screen. There's the traditional stats and there's the metrics. So the traditional stats, let me go over these. Total defense is your traditional total defense number. That's total yards per game. And then there's scoring defense, which is just how many points allowed per game, your average. You're just very traditional scoring defense statistic. Whatever that number is. And I want to compare these two metrics over at BCF Toys. Brian Freemo does a great job. And I love his stats because I think it's very fair. This is the fairest way to do it, from my understanding, is to take out garbage time, take out overtimes, because you want to
4 quarters.
You want 4 quarters, and you want FBS games only. So no games against FCS teams where teams can stat pad. No weird games where they go to overtime and then suddenly it's 70 something to 60 something when it was tied at 20 at the end of the regulation, and then that screws up your scoring average. Like that's thrown out. You can't stat pad in blowouts, like those kind of things. So you stream out that stuff, and then you look at sort of averages. And so I want to look at yards per play. I want to look at available yards, which I think is another key statistic. Because if your available yards is, if you're starting a defensive drive is starting at the 25 yard line, then the opposing team has 75 yards to gain. If they have a touchdown drive for 75 yards, then they've gained 75. Then they've gained 100% of their yards, right? If they only gain 30 something yards, then they only gain 50% of their yards, right? Like that's how it works. And so I think that's another metric to measure this defense by, rather than the total yardage. Well, okay, so I put everything together and I put mystery teams. So if you're watching here on YouTube, there's mystery teams A, B, C, D, E, and F. With total defense, scoring defense, and then those other metrics that I talked about: yards per play, available yards, and points per drive that have had garbage time, overtime, and FCS games taken out of it, right? So mystery team A is 67th in total defense, 68th in scoring defense, but in the metrics, they are 92nd, 71st, and 76th. You look at mystery team B, they are horrible on the total averages: 114th in total defense, 101st in scoring defense, but yet they're slightly better in some of the metrics: 81st in yards per play, but horrible in things like points per drive at 113th, right? If you're watching on YouTube, you can see all these numbers. Mystery team D is the one that's sort of good all the way across: 31st on the traditional statistics, scoring and total defense, but something like 21st in points per drive, which is better than their 31st ranking in scoring defense. There's mystery team E and F. E is really bad in terms of scoring defense, at 93rd in the country. But they are even worse in points per drive at 111th. And then there's Team F, which is really bad at scoring defense, 113th in the country, but only 79th in points per drive. Alicia, if you're looking at these teams, do you have any guesses on what any of these teams might be? And I know that this is a visual thing, so I'm sorry if you're listening on audio, but on YouTube you can at least see all the stats. So I'm not just reading these things, which would be bad audio probably.
So here's part of the problem is that you have put the answer key in our doc, and I have now seen it.
You've been spoiled.
I've been spoiled to certainly the front half of
Sure.
what it is. So, what I will say, what I will comment on this, because now I do know the identity of too many of these mystery teams to just be a good exercise. What I will say is that there is a notable difference between a mystery team D, which is just a cross the board, not an elite defense, but an effective defense, clearly at 31st, 32nd, 22nd, 21st. And a defense like mystery team B, which is straight up bad at everything. And a mystery team F, which is straight up bad in the traditional measures, but better off when you take
mediocre.
When you take garbage time out, when you take all that kind of stuff, just goes to mediocre, but still is mediocre.
Yeah.
So I think you should reveal the teams though, because that's where it gets interesting.
All right, let's reveal the teams. So the way this works out, Malcolm in the chat says that F might be SC. Yes,
Correct.
Team F is SC. 2023 USC is Team F under Alex Grinch. It's fascinating because SC currently is horrific in the traditional stats, 114th in total defense, 113th in scoring defense. But when you take out all when you adjust it, it's just mediocre on defense. 68th in yards per play, 57th in available yards, 79th in points per drive. And I think that that to me at first, when I first saw this, I'm like, that seems to sort of make sense in the line of a defense that is going to be out there for a ton of plays. That makes sense that their total numbers would be horrific, but they'd maybe be better on averages. But the weird thing is you look at last year's Team E, and last year's team was worse in the metrics than they were in the total numbers. SC was 122nd in yards per play, the adjusted yards per play, 116th in the adjusted available yards, and 111th in adjusted points per drive. So just horrendous.
Does that not tell us that the expected improvement, the reasons we expected improvement from this defense, well, I think there are two things. No, two things. First, the reasons we expected improvement on defense, the personnel additions, all of that kind of stuff, have played a role in improving the defense, at least in some of those metrics. That the yards per play, available yards, all that kind of stuff has improved from last year. And that maybe we can attribute that to the addition of somebody like Bear Alexander, some, the defensive, I mean, the edge rush guys, all of that kind of stuff, that maybe that has played a role. I do also think that we are talking about incomplete data on 2023 before USC has played the best offenses it will face this season.
We need to revisit these 3 weeks from now, because I think this could easily change after SC plays Washington, Oregon, and UCLA.
Yes, but Malcolm in the chat also sort of hits on the big difference for me with 2023 is the turnover regression. But it's not just the turnover regression. That is certainly part of it. But it's turnover regression plus all of the other things that are just basically red zone stops. USC is not getting red zone stops at a rate that they need to be getting red zone stops for the yards per play or available yards or points per drive kind of stuff to even reflect an improvement on defense. Because in the end, you can have a really solid defense, but if you are incapable, or on the other side, you can have a really solid offense, but if you pull a David Shaw and become incapable of scoring in the red zone, you suddenly look like complete and utter crap, even though you are perfectly capable of moving the ball.
Yeah.
And defensively, you can be effective on a per play basis, but if the important plays result in touchdowns, then none of that mattered.
Yeah, I think turnovers play a big role. SC was forcing turnovers even when they gave up a lot of yards last year. I think the other thing is there is some part of this is the effects of the Notre Dame game and the Arizona game, where SC gave up a lot of points in those games. That one, they gave up, what was it, 13 overtime points to Arizona on short fields. They gave up a bunch of short field touchdowns to Notre Dame because of turnovers. Like, those affect things on the turnover side also. Last year's team was more bend don't break, where they were giving up yards more so than just points. And this year's team is boom or bust. They're either getting a 3 and outs or they're giving up a touchdown drive.
Yeah.
And I think that ends up making some of those metrics look better than they are, because there is a lot of boom, but there is a lot of bust. Then the flip side is they haven't played Oregon and Washington yet, which are going to, wreak
Adjust
havoc
numbers,
at a lot of these numbers. But if you look at the rest of the chart, the one that you point out is 2019 LSU under Dave Aranda, which I think is the gold standard. That's the gold standard defense for having a incredible offense. We talked about this before. You do not need to be a world-class defense if you have a world-class offense, but you need to be good. And LSU's defense was good. They were top 25 in enough of these stats to warrant being fine.
And that's the thing, is if your offense is scoring 45 points a game, you winning games 45 to 21, 45 to 25 is perfectly fine.
Yes.
If your offense can barely score 25 points, you need your defense to be holding teams under 10. You need to have your scoring averages under 10.
Right.
But when you look at like a statistical measure of the 130 some odd teams in college football, the teams that hold teams to under 15 points, like your Georgia or your Ohio State or whatever, they're going to be ranked up in the top 5, top 10 in 2019. LSU scoring defense wise is all the way down at 31, but giving up 21 points when you are accounting for your offense is scoring that many points that
your
quickly,
offense scores 55.
you're facing more drives. That accounts for you're giving up more points, but you're only giving up more points to the tune of 21, which is half of the scoring average of your offense. If your defense is half of the scoring average of your offense, then you can work with that. And you can sort of see that with a Georgia team that year that is giving up 12 points per game, but only scoring 30 points per game offensively. Again, they're half as good at of their scoring offense is what their defense is giving up. So they're going to win a ton of games and they're going to be fine. Yeah. It's just you sort of take the measure of this is a good measure and you slide it up the scale a little bit. And that doesn't mean that your defense is incapable of getting the job done. It just means that statistically they're giving up more points.
Yeah.
But again, you still have to be within that range of you're still, you might be giving up more points on defense, but you're also scoring that many more points on offense.
Yeah. And then the other mystery teams that were on this, A, B, and C, are all Oklahoma teams. Oklahoma teams that Lincoln Riley took to the playoff 3 different times in 2017, 18, and 19. 18, the year in which he fired Mike Stoops and Ruffin McNeil took over as defensive coordinator, and they were atrocious. They were 101st in scoring defense, and yet they still made the playoff. And they were 113th in points per drive and still made the playoff. 2019, Alex Grinch's first year at Oklahoma, in terms of the traditional stats, much better. 38th in total defense, 64th in scoring defense, very middle of the road. But when you compare that to when you combine that with an offense that had Jalen Hurts, that's good enough, right? And they got to the playoff that way. Obviously, they didn't win a game in the playoff. They faced that LSU team and got absolutely lily-warped. But, you look at the other numbers, 64th in yards per play, adjusted yards per play is not too different than what SC is this year, 68th. The difference is in the traditional numbers, SC is giving up way more yards and points than that Oklahoma team was. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of those points have to do with what the offense has done with the or with sort of the Notre Dame game and the Arizona game. I think factor in there's a bunch of extra points that have been added in on this defense, but at the same time, all the points Cal earned, all 49 points was on that USC defense. Yeah. And so it's a mixed bag.
And
so
Utah's 30 some odd points is a bad sign for USC's defense too.
100%.
Again, all relative to what the other side is capable of.
So we will revisit these stats later on in the after the regular season is over, and we can look back at these and then try to understand it. I don't know what my takeaway is. So, if you have a takeaway in looking at these things, let us know. Email address, randomtroy@fanside.com. Phone number, 818-643-7227. Because I don't know what it is. I think the biggest takeaway is you need to be good. You need to be better if you're going
My biggest takeaway is I would hesitate, and I'm not going to let Lincoln Riley off the hook on this. I would just hesitate to say that it is a Lincoln Riley's offense. The defense will always be terrible question until we have seen more than 2 defensive coordinators coordinate under Lincoln Riley, and also more than one of them actually hired by him as not an inherited defensive coordinator. I'm just withholding judgment is where I'm at on whether or not this is a Lincoln Riley problem or just a you have a bad defensive coordinator or just a not good defensive coordinator at best, and your offense is going to statistically hurt that defense no matter what. But you can take a great defensive coordinator, statistically hurt them, and they still have a good enough defense.
Yeah, right. Because that's the Dave Aranda thing. Yeah, they didn't have a top 5 defense at LSU, but they were top 30, and top 30 with that offense makes you a world beater team. Yeah. And if SC had a top 30 defense right now, they'd be in the playoff. And what did we talk about? Washington, they are 32nd in defense on SP Plus, and if SC was right there, they'd be in the same spot.
There's also a new paradigm coming too, because one of the things that I've always suspected is that the offenses in the Pac-12 and the Big 12 traditionally have just been more firepower. Statistically, the defenses in those conferences are harmed by that as well.
Yeah. The inverse is true in the Big 10.
The inverse is true in the Big 10 and SEC. So I'm not saying that Georgia's defenses have been for real. Alabama's defenses have been for real, but your statistical averages are always going to trend shorter when the offenses that you're facing are generally just more limited. So it will be interesting in the Big 10 to see how this all sort of shakes out as well, because the Big 10 is introducing teams from traditionally more high-powered offensive conferences. So,
yeah, I think the Big 10 is going to end up. Yeah, the defenses are going to be more challenged, but also SC is going to face, say, Illinois, who there's not an offense in the Pac-12 that is better, worse than Illinois. Well, I can't imagine.
If USC played, just look at Stanford is the worst team in the Pac-12, and that offense is still has a little bit of something going.
They scored 30-something points against Washington last week. Yeah.
Iowa's offense, if USC got to play Iowa's offense, they'd probably still go up 30 points to them because USC played Utah's offense, but USC has a terrible defense. So
I think that's the difference, is that when bad Pac-12 teams with bad offenses meet up against each other, they still end up scoring a lot of points.
Yeah.
When bad teams in the Big 10 meet up against each other, there just is no points scored, period.
Yeah.
The defense still trucks out. Let's go to a call we got from Bodie.
Hello, Michael and Alicia. Spoony, third time caller. I'd just like to say that my prediction is I'll say that USC record at the end of the season would be 7-5. Mark my word. They have 3 games left. Thank God. Once those 3 games are over with, then they get to pick their bowl game that they attend to. Once they get to their bowl game, Alex Grinch and company will finally win a bowl game, first time. And then I can see Lincoln Riley now jumping for joy, give Alex Grinch his raise that he always wanted, and then give him an extension for another 5 more years. Hooray! I'll go for that. 5 more years of Alex Grinch, Lincoln Riley. Can you imagine that? I'll bet my bottom dollars. That's going to be it. 5, 7 and 5. 7 and 5 is going to be a record. Bye.
Thanks for the call. I think 7 and 5 is absolutely on the table when you consider that all 3 teams SC is going to face are ranked ahead of them in the college football playoff ranking. So yeah, of course 7 and 5 is on the table, and we talked about it earlier, the comparisons to 2012. So yeah, I think that's the case. If 7 and 5 happens, I understand the frustration with Lincoln Riley and all that. I thoroughly get it. I understand the pessimism in him not making changes, but there is no way in hell, if they go 7 and 5, that Alex Grinch gets renewed. Like there's no way. It cannot happen. There's no way it does.
I'm going to do a thing right now. If Alex Grinch is USC's defensive coordinator in 2024, I will take a pickle, I will put a dab of Da Bomb hot sauce on it, and I will eat it live on air.
Oh my God.
For those who don't understand the degree of a bet that I am making on this, I hate pickles. And the only thing I hate more than pickles is very hot things, very spicy things. I will take a pickle, I will put a dab of Da Bomb or The Last Dab or whatever. I have friends who have these hot sauces. They watch that show. I will do this if Alex Grinch is USC's defensive coordinator for the 2024 season.
Tim in the chat says at any point in 2024 or for all of 2024?
No, if he is retained for the 2024 season. So I presume by the time USC is getting ready to get spring camp, if USC is going into January with Alex Grinch as the defensive coordinator, if it has been stated outright that Alex Grinch is being retained by USC, I will do this. This is my bet. I am this confident that Alex Grinch will not be USC's defensive coordinator in 2024.
Wow. Now I feel like I'm rooting for it. Wow. Joe in the chat says this is the perfect time to ask about the lasagna theory. Maybe. Let's
to be quite honest, if Alex Grinch is USC's defensive coordinator in 2024, I do not know if I will continue to choose to podcast about USC.
I thought that's where I thought you were going. I thought you were going to say you're going to be done with the pod.
So in order to avoid the payoff on my pickle hot sauce bet, maybe I will just quit the pod.
All right. Sagar says, do you guys remember that time that we hosted Utah? They were ranked so high that we were favored and we covered. Yeah. 2015. The Cam Smith 3-pick game.
Yeah.
I don't think this is quite the same scenario. But absolutely, SC has done weird things. They beat Stanford in 2013, the field rushing game, which can we have the field rushing conversation? If SC wins.
No.
You rush the field?
No.
Why not?
USC rushing the field in 2013 to me was a very, very special, unique situation.
Okay.
USC had an interim head coach. USC was facing a Stanford team that had been a heated rival for many years. USC was sort of bolstered by the Coach O of it all. It felt like a unique. USC wasn't ranked in that game, right? Like, what was USC's record going into that game? They had 3 losses already.
I think so.
that
like
was
6-3,
an extremely unique situation that was so close to the sanctions. There was just a let off of energy at that point. Washington, as Richard in Discord pointed out, USC hasn't played Washington at the Coliseum since 2015.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't played Washington full stop since 2019. They've only played them less than a handful of times in the last decade. Like, this is not a team that USC has a bitter rivalry with the way that USC had a bitter rivalry with Stanford at that time. You're also a ranked team with the reigning Heisman Trophy winner. I do not think rushing the field is appropriate in this situation. If USC were to win, personally. But I'm also like, having said that, I don't want to see USC fans do that. Having said that, if USC fans at the Coliseum do it, I'm not in the business of judging whether or not teams rush the field. I just know that personally, I do not think that this rises to a rush the field scenario.
I am against rushing the field from a safety perspective. I want people to be safe. I don't want people to hurt themselves. All those things. I get worried about that. I'm pro rushing the field in literally every other instance. Yeah, rush the field. Have fun.
As Kenny points out, they didn't
rush tradition. Like, there is no like, just enjoy yourself. You beat a top 5 team. You're allowed to rush the field. I don't care who you are. Like, you rush the field. Like, go for it.
Like,
be safe. Don't hurt yourself,
and don't get in the face of the opposing players' team. Like, don't opposing players, all that kind of stuff. Like, I like, again, I'm not in the judgment of like giving like moral judgments about it. Fans rushing the field again, like you said, like, have fun. But like I said, I don't know that this is.
How many times is SC the underdog at home to a top 5 team? Not many times.
Yeah, you don't.
Not many times. This is the situation of when you field rush. So go for it. Like, go for it. Be safe, but like, live life. Like, it's college football. It ain't that serious. Which is also why, like, I saw that there was criticism about Arizona rushing the field when they beat Oregon State last week. What are we doing?
Yeah.
Like, let Arizona live. Let them live. Like, come on. Like, they beat a ranked team. Like, yeah, let them feel good about themselves and rush the field. I love that Clemson rushes the field for every game. I think that's cool. I think it's cool.
Yeah.
Have fun. Have fun in life.
Yeah.
Yeah. But be safe. Be safe. Don't hurt people.
Be safe and don't be an asshole.
Don't be an idiot that goes up to former players. I mean, to players or anything like that. Yeah. Like, don't be an asshole. Don't be a terrible person. Seriously, don't. Like, but have fun. Especially the kids in school. How many opportunities do you get to field rush if you're a student? Yeah. Not many. And this idea that, like, oh, SC doesn't field rush. We don't do that. SC field rushed in 96, 99, 2013. 3 times in my life they've field rushed. I get it that 96 was a 17-year drought to Notre Dame. 99 was an 8-year drought to UCLA. And 2013 was like a 4-year drought to Stanford. I get that part. But, like, how many times are you an underdog to a number 5 team at home? Not many. So go for it. Have fun. Live life. There's only so many days that we get to be on this earth.
I think a lot of this also depends on how, like, if it's a dramatic ending like it was in 2013, I fully expect a field rush. But 2015 is a really good example of, like, if you just win the game and it's just you just win the game because you win the game. Like, I don't think we'll see it, but USC also has to win the game in order to have that conversation.
Yeah, for sure. It absolutely. You win the game because you go up 17-0 and then end up winning the game 24-21, hanging on for dear life.
Yeah, like, no one's rushing the field.
Maybe not. Anyways, Rob Murray says, if you're USC, do you play ball control to keep Washington's offense off the field and keep our defense off the field? I think that this is one of those situations where you do what you do. If SC is going to win this game, they're going to do it by outscoring Washington. So you just buy into what you do. There's no need to change yourself here. I
think that the more important thing is score. whatever else you do, whether you do it quickly or slowly, whether you take 15 plays or 3 plays, if a touchdown is at the end of it, then that is the result that USC needs. Everything else is what it'll be.
Yeah. Randy says, if it was your decision to hire the next defensive coordinator, and you have to pick between Jimmy Lake, Jim Leonard, or Gary Patterson, who would you choose and why?
Jimmy Lake is not in my consideration personally. What is Gary Patterson doing these days?
He was a special assistant to Texas last year.
Yeah, I'm leaning Jim Leonard just because he's been an effective defensive coordinator far more recently, has not been sort of out of the game and is just more in it.
This is the easiest multiple choice I've ever seen.
Yeah,
Randy, I love that you put Jim Leonard in here because
if you had Dave Aranda in there, it would be a different conversation.
Dave Aranda versus Jim Leonard, I think, is an interesting debate, and yeah, flip a coin maybe. But Jimmy Lake, I think Jimmy Lake would be a very good defensive coordinator for football reasons only. But there are there's the whole toxic thing about Jimmy Lake putting his hands on a player, and I don't think SC is the school that can give him the second chance when Jen Cohen was the one who fired him at Washington.
Can you imagine the drama?
Yeah, like that's SC is not in the position to do the Jimmy Lake thing. When Jen 20 years from now, when Jimmy Lake is like 60 years old, yeah, maybe you can bring Jimmy Lake in here or whatever, but like not when Jen Cohen is here. Jim Leonard, absolutely one of the best defensive coordinators in the country, is on sabbatical. Like, yes, he's the guy. Gary Patterson, I love Gary Patterson. He's one of the guys I've always loved and wanted SC to hire for so many years. The game passed him by, and TCU was always a defensive team. Yet once they got to the Big 12, they ended up being Big 12 bad more often than not.
As another example of what we were just talking about, that like in the Big 12 and Pac 12, your defensive statistics also suffer.
This is true. Yes, I agree. But also, like, those teams weren't known for defense the last decade that he was at TCU. Before they were, but not the last decade. So, yeah, it's Jim Leonard there. Soccer says, my expectations for the seasons have gone out the window. So watching games now is much more tolerable. No anxiety because of a loss doesn't much do anything than create chatter about ousting a coach. It's nice. I think this is the perspective to have, especially going into these next 2 weeks where SC surely is the underdog. Yeah. Okay. You don't like Alex Grinch. You want him fired? Well, then here you go. Here's your opportunity. Like, you win, revel in the win. You lose? Well, hey, there you go. It's one step closer to what you want anyways.
I wish I could have that perspective. But I also know myself, and I know I will not be calm.
Ron Murdy says, what bowl game do you think SC will get to go to? Yahoo Sports has us playing Clemson in the Holiday Bowl. I haven't thought about
Should
the
bowls. They rename that the Holiday Bowl brought to you by Crushing Disappointment? That's what that Holiday Bowl matchup would be. Yeah.
It's anything would be better than the Sun Bowl.
We could theoretically go to the Holiday Bowl, so that would be fun.
We could, but it would be
Crushing Disappointment.
Yeah.
The Crushing Disappointment Bowl.
Yeah, I haven't thought about the other bowls. That's the sad part. It's like, yeah, the Holiday Bowls there. I've seen the Alamo Bowl against Oklahoma. That is the worst case scenario. The number one thing you do not want is SC to face Oklahoma. Like, not in a million years. Jesse, okay over there? She has thoughts on the bowls.
I don't know if you guys can hear that, but she just started making some weird noises.
Yeah, she has big opinions on the bowl games.
All I know is I want nothing to do with Oklahoma. I can't. I do not want. We already are exhausted enough trying to figure out how to keep the trolls out of our chat. Like I'm no, thank you. Big pass. Big pass.
Yeah, any of these bowls sound bad. Like you don't want any of it. The LA Bowl, at least it's local and you get to go to SoFi, I guess.
Yeah.
But the LA Bowl means losing out, so I don't know that you want that option either. Mark says Lucky Charms or Crunch Berries. I've never had Crunch Berries, but not Lucky Charms. Lucky Charms is absolute garbage.
That is a garbage take. Lucky Charms are amazing.
It's
One of my
horrendous.
favorite cereals.
Horrendous.
Top 5.
Marshmallows in general, ass. Pure ass.
One of your top 5 bad
pure
takes.
ass.
Bad.
No.
Bad. This man doesn't like marshmallows. That's
right, because they're horrific. They're terrible. They're garbage. Absolute garbage. Randy says, do you think USA will play one complete game this season? USC, I think. US. I don't know what it says USA. I think there was a typo.
Yeah.
Will play one complete game this season, offense, defense, special teams. I think the one complete game was
Nevada.
Was it Stanford? The other thing,
Yeah.
but you can say that wasn't a complete game because it was one half.
Yeah.
So
that's right. Yeah. Well, yeah.
I would say that if SC is going to play one complete game, the UCLA game is the one to bet on, because that's one where I think the defense could flex its muscles a little bit, relatively speaking. Because I wouldn't hold my breath against Washington or Oregon for the defense to,
the defense
assert
isn't going
itself
to do its
enough.
job against Washington or Oregon. I'm pretty certain about that.
Yeah. Brenton says, I wish SC had the balls to fire Grinch like the Raiders fired Josh McDaniels. Antonio Pierce got that dog in him. Grinch is a poodle. Poodle is a dog, though.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, Josh McDaniels, big.
Did he really get fired that way, or is that just a viral troll? That's a viral troll.
It's a troll. It's not real, and I'm very sad about it because that would have been classic.
Okay.
But no, the whole fortune cookie thing is not true. In case you guys hadn't heard, just saying those words.
Well, the fortune cookie thing is funny too, because like I can't even imagine Mark Davis being that witty. Like I don't think Mark Davis has it in him to be that petty and like
so
cunning.
So petty and like just beyond it.
Yeah.
USC Glenn in the chat says, I'm loving these 2-hour shows. We have officially hit the 2-hour mark.
We start every episode with, okay, we're not going to, we're going to be quick.
Tight hour-long episode.
We have a little interpod chat going that is usually like, here, I'll just read you some things. Don't forget to turn on the slides, dumbass.
That's not what I said.
Oh, you
said turn on slides.
Yeah, but I added the dumbass there. And then you're like, don't forget, there's a super chat in all caps. There's a super chat. Yeah. And then we'll just put like FF, like, okay, fast forward through this part. Hurry up, timing. So like we're saying these things to each other back and forth as the thing goes. And we try to tell each other that we're not going to
go 2
hours. We're going to just stick to an hour today. And then here we are. 2 hours.
On Monday, it's more of a thing because I'm working, and it's like, okay, we gotta go. On Wednesdays, it's like, screw it.
Yeah,
screw it.
And now here we are. It's 7:00, and Kenny says we've gone through the World Series game. Do I want to Google what the score? Top of the 7th.
Top of the 7th, 1-0.
1-0 Rangers.
It sucks because Gallen was working on a no-hitter for a while there.
Yeah. Dan says, I haven't even heard Michael's mouse click once. Is that a thing? Do you guys hear my mouse?
It might be my mouse that you hear. My mouse.
It's probably yours. Yeah. You're the one that's always clicking away over there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, all right. We're going to wrap this thing up there. We've been on long. You guys have been awesome. As always, the chat is not
crushing disappointment.
No, the chat is not. The chat is, that's what the chat is. So, All right. We will Dan says yes, here's this clicking. That's Alicia.
It's probably me.
Yeah. In the audio only episodes, I try to scrub those things. So help our people listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Another reason why you should chime in with the review. But we will be back Saturday night, late Saturday night, because we'll be at the game and then going home after that to do the CarCast. So SC and Washington, Lock and Horns, 4:30 p.m. on ABC. It's Fowler and Kirk on the call. Love that. Absolutely love that. But it's a big one. No football reason for SC to win the game. So we'll see what happens, which means that they probably will. Maybe. We'll see. Be sure to make your over-under picks. And until then, we will see ya. See ya.